From the Fatheads Eyewear Studio in Indianapolis, Indiana, this is The Skinny.
Maybe I need to start in the trash truck business.
Don't rule it out.
But the steering is spokes on the wheel straight ahead. The steering's broken. Bridges takes the wheel and he goes, whoa, whoa.
He's airborne, and then I'm above him.
Inverted.
All at the same time. Yeah, you're just like, wow, that's a wild picture.
He gets behind the race car and he tells me if I'm good or not, and if I'm good, he'll go, perfect.
I hang up on the guy. I go, who's this? This is Deion Sanders. I go, yeah, nice try. See you later.
Bounce and then this insane roll. That thing sent it.
I hate qualifying. It's the worst. It's literally the worst thing you could ever do.
But I'm smooth and creamy like milk chocolate. Have you ever not saw a Hershey bar that did not look good?
Hi, I'm Tony Stewart.
I'm Mario Andretti.
I'm Johnny Rutherford.
I'm Angel Sampe.
I'm Travis Pastrana.
This is Antron Brown.
Hey, I'm Mike Lashmett, and this is The Skinny.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The Skinny. This is the Fatheads Eyewear Studio. I am Ken Stout. That's the boss
Of nobody.
Rico Elmore. Thought we'd kick this one off right. The track dude back there, as always, running the controls, Mr. Michael Young. What's up? And we have Mike Lashmett with us from Vintage Indy, and his lovely wife is sitting over in the shadows. Miss Dana is with us as well. So welcome to the show, Mike, for starters. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're not familiar with it, and I know just a smidgen about Vintage Indy, mostly because we usually are at Long Beach competing. So, and the cars are always out there and they're just absolutely spectacular. But some of the most beautiful, fully restored vintage Indy cars on the planet that they actually put out on the track and treat the fans to how they looked and how they sounded back in the day. And this guy is responsible for putting that together. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ken and Rico. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a magnificent studio. This is really, really neat. So
I've got to start off with what I know is royalty in the IndyCar world for the people that walk around. It only takes one quick glance, but you were wearing an Indianapolis 500 winning ring.
I am. I was with I was with two Indy 500 winning teams. The first one was Vels Parnelli Jones. So I was with that team in 71 when they won the 500, and with Al Sr. in the Johnny Lightning car. That was my first year in IndyCar. And then later on, I was with Patrick in this building, as we talked about earlier, when they won in 73 with John Cox, so with Gordy.
Wow.
Yeah. We had several victories that year. We won the 500 with Gordy, and then Gordy won the second Trenton, the second Phoenix race that year for us. Wally Dallenbach won the second Milwaukee race, which was his first ever IndyCar win. And then a couple of weeks later, he won the California 500, which was huge.
And was that the day, was it 72?
73.
73. Did the Eagle debut in 72?
The Roman Slobodinsky groundbreaking Eagle debuted in 72. Dan and AAR built 29 of those.
Oh, wow.
They were chassis numbered from 7201 up to 7230. There was no chassis 7213 out of, I guess, superstition.
Right.
But
probably no green ones either.
No,
they had
no
that
green ones.
thing going on back then too.
Groundbreaking car, I can tell you. I was with Vels Parnelli Jones. We had the VP James one with the dihedral wings that Maurice Felipe designed, and right out of the box, the car didn't work from its first outing at a test out in Ontario, and that car put us through fits and starts the whole season. But we ran that car for the first time at Trenton. We started out the season with the year-old Colts. We had Mario, Joe Leonard, and Al Sr. Used the old Colts at Phoenix, and then Trenton, we debuted that new car. Got to the Speedway for practice right out of the box. Bobby Unser, number 6 Olsenite Eagles, running 192 miles an hour. And I think we were stuck. I was on Al's car, Al Sr.'s car. I think we were stuck at 182, 185, really struggling. Eventually, after the first week of practice, conversation ensued within the team between Val Parnelli, George Bignotti, the chief mechanic, and Maurice Felipe, the famous designer who had come to us from Lotus to take those dihedral wings off. And Bignotti won out. The wings came off. They housed the engine oil coolers. That presented another problem, where to put them. We ended up flush mounting them on the side of that tub and had to build aluminum fairings. A lot of work when you're at the speedway. And anyway, right out of the box, we picked up 5 miles an hour.
Wow.
But the Eagle was, you needed, back in that era, you needed a brand new 7200 series Eagle or an M16 McLaren. And everybody wanted one. And they didn't much care whether it was new or used, but they knew that they could run up front with those cars, and that's what it was going to take. So
I just remember going through the website there, but just looking at the 6 car, oh my God, the thing is just so beautiful. But they were a little bit longer, a little bit wider. The profile so low, so aero. I mean, it was incredible. And did they show up with was that the one they showed up with a stock block, or was that the Eagle in 81 that they showed up with
the stock block Eagle was the later Eagle, built from 81 through 83,
Right,
and that's
okay.
called the Blatt Eagle. Blatt was BLAT, was an acronym for Boundary Layer Adhesion Technology. And that was Dan Gurney's answer to ground effects, and Colin Chapman's term ground effects. The car worked phenomenally well right out of the box. You know, Mosley won a race at Milwaukee, starting from last and finishing first, and they weren't able to qualify. They lost a motor at practice, and the rest is history. Al Unser Jr.'s rookie year car, which we have at our shop, is a Blatt Eagle. I'm probably not absolutely correct on this, but I think they built 13 of those in the course of 3 years. But it turned out to be Dan Gurney's favorite designed Eagle. The Pepsi Challenger Eagle, which Mike Mosley drove, was Dan's all-time favorite Eagle design, and the Gurney family has that in their collection out in California. But that's the Blatt Eagle. You know, I want to go to Indianapolis. I don't have enough money for gas for my Volkswagen Beetle. So I went up to my mom's office and, told her what the situation was and asked her if I may borrow $20.
The Skinny is brought to you by Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04. And American Coach. Innovation is our life force.
Welcome back to the Skinny. We have a wonderful guest here with us from Vintage IndyCar, and Mike's schooling us all here, and he will continue to do so. Just a wealth of knowledge. Honestly, dude, your memory and the names that you're able to recall so quickly is it's quite a talent. How did you get started? How did Mike get started back when he was a young man? When were you first impressed with racing, and what was your family like? How did you get in this industry?
Everybody wants to know this story, and I've told it, and whenever I'm around friends that know it, and we have people with us who don't know it, the friends always encourage me to tell the story. But I grew up in a little farm town over in west central Illinois, about 65 miles west of Springfield, a place called Pittsfield, 5,000 people. We had a high banked quarter-mile dirt track there. They ran a weekly sprint car super modified program. USAC midgets had come through there a couple of times every summer. My uncle John Petty married my mother's youngest sister. And when they were dating, I was about 5. This is in the late 50s. And my uncle John built cars and raced. And so they started taking me to the races with them before they were married. And, I was immediately hooked. My uncle went on to build, big time winning cars for Jerry Blundy, who's in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame. And that's how I got interested in it. And like most American kids, model cars, slot cars. And then I was 14, I started racing go-karts, totally focused on motorsports, never into any other kind of sport, playing other, high school sports. And when I graduated from high school, everybody knew that I wanted to come to Indianapolis, go to work for an IndyCar team. And people thought, that's far-fetched and, that's a crazy idea. But I was really bent on doing that, and didn't know a soul over here in Indianapolis. Came over here and took a week off from my regular job that summer and came over here and started poking around. And, nobody was hiring. I went everywhere. Bill Finley, Grant King, Watson, you name it, all these people, I figured out where their shops were. And so when I came over here that week, I stayed at the Speedway Motel. And it was inexpensive back then. I think it was $12, $15 a night or something. And every morning I'd get up, I'd go in the restaurant there and get something to eat for breakfast before I went out and pounded the pavement. And there was a woman that worked there for Mr. Holman by the name of Rosemary Ensley, and I'm sure some people will remember her. And anyway, Rosemary Ensley spoke to me several times, and I didn't think, just conversation. And so I was there about 5 or 6 days. I went home and on a Friday afternoon, and no job. Didn't find anything over
This was
here.
about what year?
71.
Okay.
And so went home, and I'm getting ready to go to my regular job was at an IGA grocery store. I was, a buddy of mine's dad owned it, and I'd worked there through high school, and got up one morning to go to work, or that Monday morning, and my mom was the county health nurse, and she was up and getting ready to go to work. And just about the time she was ready to leave, the wall phone in our kitchen rang. My mother answered it, and she said, "It's for you." And so I pick up the phone. Well, it's this lady, Rosemary Ensley, that I had met in passing at the Speedway Motel. And she
got your number from the check-in.
Correct. And she asked me if I remembered her. Well, yeah, this had only been last week. So yes, of course I remember you. And she goes, George McNaughty comes in here for breakfast every morning. And he came in this morning, and I mentioned you to him, and he's looking to hire somebody. And she goes, "I think if you can get back over here this afternoon, you might have a job."
This afternoon.
Yeah, this is like unbelievable. This is 265 miles west of Indianapolis, where I live. So my mom had walked out the door, and she was a county health nurse, had her office up in the county courthouse. And so I told Rosemary, okay, so I hang up the phone, and I'm supposed to go to this job, and, I want to go to Indianapolis. I don't have enough money for gas for my Volkswagen Beetle. So I went up to my mom's office and, told her what the situation was and asked her if I may borrow $20. So she thought I was nuts, but she gave me the $20 for gas money, and I'd packed a small suitcase, and I straight back over here. And I go straight to 15th Street to Vels Parnelli Jones, which is where Walter Goodwin has race car restorations now. Walked in, and there's Big Naughty, a Johnny Lightning uniform, and Jimmy Dillamarter and John Caples and all these people that I identified. And so I walked right up to George, introduced myself. He gave me an impromptu interview and hired me on the spot, and asked me if I had a place to live, and I told him no, and he wrote this address down. He says, "Go see this lady in Speedway." Okay. He says, "Be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. This is what the job pays per week," and blah, blah, blah. So, okay. So I head out to Speedway, go to this little bungalow on 13th Street, and knock on the door, and this elderly woman comes to the front door, and her name was Stella Hazelwood. And she had her basement set up like a little army barracks for race car people. And she took me down, showed me the setup. Place was tidy as can be. Little kitchenette with a Formica table and chairs and refrigerator and sink. And there was a bathroom with a shower, and there were like 6 beds down there, little closets and things. And she goes, "It's $25 a month." And I go, "It'll work for me," So
Wow.
that's how I started. And, I think I lived down in her basement for 2 years. And
She's still renting a place. I need to
No,
go
I think-
somewhere.
sadly, she's
It's
long
not
gone.
$25 a month.
Yeah, that's a
anymore.
good deal. But Bill Simpson lived down there, and all these people would come through, primarily California sprint car guys, coming back here to run USAC or try to get in at Indy, or get a ride or something like that. But it was really interesting.
She had to be pretty tough.
There were 2 rules: no booze, no girls. That was it.
She had to be pretty tough,
Yeah.
because I can assure you that,
Yeah.
Both of those lead right to trouble. So
But,
we're not bringing any of that in here.
The funny thing is, on that kitchen table down there's an old style ledger book, one of those green cloth covered things. And I'm sitting there one day, and I start leafing through this pages, and this thing went way back, and it was a who's who of Indy 500 drivers.
Wow.
I mean, among a lot of other people, but
that it stayed there.
it was fascinating. She wanted everybody to sign the book, whatever
Sure.
happened to the book, I don't know. When my wife and I left there, we had our first event, which was going to be in 2018 IndyCar race.
You were looking at Mr. Mike Lashmett. Welcome to the studio here. He is the CEO and president of Vintage Indy. Great to have him here in the studio. Unbelievable stories. He's been in this game for a long, long time, and obviously his recall is much better than mine. There's not too many names that it seems like he has forgotten along the way. Hey, man, before we get too far into this show, we get towards the end of the show, let's talk about your series. Let's talk about what it was that inspired you to start it, And then your schedule. Where can the people see the cars that you put on display?
Absolutely. So, Vintage Indy, we started way back in late 2016, early 2017. I had served in the Marine Corps, and I had a nephew that was going through boot camp back in 2016 out in San Diego. A lot of our family members went out for his graduation. Philippe de L'Espinay, who was a friend of Dan Gurney's and mine, knew I was coming out for that and arranged for my wife and I to go down to AAR in Santa Ana. I hadn't been there in like 40 years. And they said, come down, we'll have lunch, visit AAR, see Dan's collection. By that time, they had taken the old engine room at AAR and they turned it into this wonderful gallery with these incredible, Eagles, including the GTP car and all this great memorabilia. So my wife and I went down. We spent the better part of the day down there, had lunch, had a great time, and we're all standing around in this collection room. And somebody said, hey, we're taking the number 6 Olsonite Eagle back to Indianapolis for the museum's HRE event, the weekend of the race. Why don't you come and help? So they didn't have to ask me twice. I said, sure. So I came back, helped them run the car, and they were going to keep the car over for 2 weeks. We took it up at Eric Bachelor's shop and stored it. And then they wanted to do SVRA, which Tony Perella was doing 2 weeks later. So they asked me, would you come back and help with SVRA? So I did. But what was the real eye-opener that weekend was Ellen Byerly put together, she was the director of IMS Museum at the time, put together 106 of these vintage Indy cars for that meeting. Of course, it was the 100th running of the 500. So the light bulb went off in my brain, which doesn't normally happen. And I thought, wow, where did these come from? Whose cars are these? And, I discerned rather quickly that, they were all privately owned and whatnot. Not too long after that, I started inquiring, like, was there any organization? Has anybody, done anything and brought a group together? And no one had. And so I came up with the idea to start Vintage Indy Registry, simply as a registry, something akin to the Shelby Registry, just to document who owned the provenance on the car, where it is today and whatnot. And that's the way we started Vintage Indy. Launched it out at the IndyCar race at Phoenix the following spring, took off immediately. And then, I don't know, within just about a year, we were contacted by a couple of track promoters.
So what is this, 17 now?
This was 17.
I
yes,
can't
sir.
believe
And-
nothing was in place until 2017. It blows my mind.
Yeah, 17. And so and later that year, George Brugenthies, who was the president up at Road America, contacted me about bringing vintage Indy cars up there with IndyCar. And I said, well, George, we really don't do that. We're just a registry. Well, we'd really like to get some vintage Indy cars up here. Okay. And then shortly thereafter, Chris Blair down at WWT Raceway reached out. And anyway, we ended up going down there for a meeting with him and Curtis Francois and their staff. And when my wife and I left there, we had our first event, which was going to be in 2018 IndyCar race. So in 2018, we only did one event, and that was with IndyCar, and that was our first at what was then called Gateway, now WWT Raceway.
Was that on the oval?
That was on the oval, and I think we had 26 cars down there with IndyCar.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys were outside turn 2 there?
The first couple of years, we were down in the IndyCar paddock, and they put up a great big tent for us. And then Chris came up with the idea to move the tent outside of turn 4 so that
Yeah,
get
4.
more fan access. And I can tell you at St. Louis, there's rabid fans down there in the St. Louis area, and we get thousands of people through our paddock wherever we go. But down in St. Louis, it's exponential.
So we were there, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember, but you guys were parked out there. And I was absolutely blown away.
It's growing steadily every year. I mean, we're in 2024 now, and we're wrapping up our season. We started out at Long Beach with IndyCar way back in April. We've done 4 IndyCar events this year. We did Long Beach, Road America, St. Louis, and just finished Nashville a week and a half ago. We have one event left, and that's the American Speed Festival at M1 Concourse facility up in Pontiac, Michigan, which is a magnificent venue. It'll be our 3rd year up there.
I looked at the
date?
schedule. I was not familiar with that one. I wasn't familiar with that place. I was curious where it was. So.
It's in Pontiac. It's on the site of a former 90-acre GM factory. I think the last vehicle General Motors built there was a Hummer. They leveled that factory, redeveloped that parcel. It's not too far from Mr. Penske's corporate headquarters up there, and his restoration shop is nearby as well. but it's roughly a mile and a half club, track, road course. They built 250 man cave garage type things sprinkled around the road course. Sold them as shells. I think they sold for around 400,000 unfinished.
Similar to a thermal club.
Correct.
Type of
Or
atmosphere.
Monticello Motor Club or Autobahn or any of these type places.
He said they were sold out almost before they broke.
Yeah,
down,
I
right?
think all of the man cave garages were sold out before they finished. They built a big, beautiful event center there. They can seat 500 people for dinner. They've got a gift shop, and it's just really a neat place. They completed a service center sort of structure up there last year. But Tim McGrain, who's the former CEO out at Laguna Seca, is the head of M1, and they do a magnificent job. So we're headed up there in just about a week with about 16 vintage Indy cars, and then they're celebrating historic NASCAR cars up there this year. So there's 22 historic NASCAR Cup cars going up there, and Richard Petty is the Grand Marshal. And then we'll have Al Jr. with us. He drives our pace car, so we're really looking forward to that.
That's great stuff.
Yeah.
Once again, we'll take a quick break here. Plenty more questions for this guy, and as you can tell, the answers are incredible. Stay with us. But I'm going to offer some knowledge to you. Even though you have all of these things in place, including that driver's meeting, I would advise you to not put Mario Andretti in any of the cars. You're looking at the Fatheads Eyewear Studio, a beautiful place located here in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm Ken Stout. The big guy is Mr. Rico Elmore, and we have Mike sitting right alongside, president of Vintage Indy, who has been filling us in with such incredible information. As we take a look at that schedule you just rattled off in the previous segment, I'm familiar with the one at Long Beach. As I had said, that's where I've seen the cars out there, and oh my goodness, they're just spectacular. But now I do know, because we also compete at Road America, whenever we get to that Road America event, it has become one of the largest vintage open wheel events in the country.
Probably
it's
the biggest.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
It is probably the biggest, yeah.
It's later after the IndyCar weekend, but Mike Kirchner now is the CEO up there, and he was schooled and groomed by George Bruganthis, the former CEO, who was fabulous in his own right. We love going to Road America. The facility is phenomenal. The setting up there, the bucolic setting in that part of Wisconsin and the small towns like Elkhart Lake Village and Plymouth and all those little places around there are really neat.
Yeah.
And then you got Siebken's in.
Absolutely.
You got the famous Siebken's Tavern in.
I have a Siebken's poster, and I have a lot of signatures all the way around it. But the only signatures that I have, you have to have either won a championship or won the Indianapolis 500. There's a couple of mulligans in there. Chip Ganassi has signed it. But
is that the Roger Warwick poster, the cartoon with all the
posters?
Yeah.
Yes,
that's terrific. Yeah,
it's. I love that area. I mean, it's just it's quintessential Mid-America.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
It's just a wonderful feeling.
I mean, we love every place we go, but Road America really holds a special place in a lot of our members' hearts. I mean, we really enjoy going up there.
Where do you find most of the cars are located?
Rico, it's crazy. I mean, you find cars in crazy places, and then sometimes you don't. But it's getting harder and harder. I mean, people are still looking for certain cars. There's certain cars
But the cars you guys have now, the members you have now, the people who travel it, are they Midwest based? Are they California based?
We've got over 330 members in Vintage Indy representing 190 cars.
Wow.
And these are big collections, small collections. We have a lot of individuals, they have one or two cars. And then we've got some members that have 20 plus cars, if you can imagine that. So they're all over. They're from coast to coast and from border to border, everywhere. Florida, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, all over the Midwest, California, Arizona.
So when you started it out, you send out a thing, hey, we're going to do these shows. And what's the rules? What's the rate? I mean, I know that there's a lot of different cars that are in, when you guys are all running, which everybody is amazingly great working with each other, and nobody's crazy and think they're going to win the 500. Thank God.
One of the most valuable things at an IndyCar weekend is the track time. And IndyCar has a really tight schedule, and they adhered to it, and you got TV involved. And so we don't have the luxury of putting different era cars out there for different time slots. So we have to put them all out there together. So we put the newer, faster rear engine cars in the front, all the Roadsters pre-war cars in the back. We have a driver's meeting before every session, lay the law down. We police the speeds with radar guns. Myself and all my staff, we're all in radio contact with one another. We take our own flagman, Jason Burgess, who's fabulous.
Jason.
He has
Oh,
a two
Jason, he's a good
he's a
buddy.
great guy.
He's a
He has-
fellow spotter with me.
He has a 2 radio headset, one with race control, IndyCar, and one with me and my staff. And then Al's got a radio in the pace car. Al Unser Jr. drives our pace car every event for the last 5 years. So that's the way we do it. And if we get a yellow, for what we've never had an incident, but if we get a yellow for a car breaks down or, stalls or whatever, we send the pace car out. And everybody's really respectful. I mean, because we end up at any given event, we've got 70 years worth of history easily in our paddock. Normally, we'll have cars anywhere from the 1930s, all the way up to the early 2000s. We mandate that a car has to be 20-year-old to be eligible for vintage Indy. So right now, a 2004 Dallara or G-Force technically could be with us. And we have had them. We've had a 2004 G-Force last year, so.
You've been a wealth of knowledge, of course, but I'm going to offer some knowledge to you. Even though you have all of these things in place, including that driver's meeting, I would advise you to not put Mario Andretti in any of the cars.
Anything.
He is going to go out and he's going to try to win that race.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. We're going to take a quick break right here, but stay with us. We'll be right back.
You can't come down pit lane like a tortoise. You need to come down like a hare.
Full on.
Full tilt and hit the mark.
The Skinny is brought to you by American Coach. American Coach. Innovation is our life force. And Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear. Hardcore since '04.
Welcome back to the Skinny. We have Mike Lashmett, the president of Vintage Indy, on the show with us here today. Great to have him out here, and lives pretty close by, right? Not too far away, and
Yep.
nice to have you whip into the studio here. We were just going to break, and I said you might not want to put Mario in one of those cars because we know he tries to win in the 2-seater. To this day, he wants to set the fastest lap.
Yep. Well, back in my era, 50 years ago, there was no pit lane speed. And you had to be pretty trusting to go out and set up for the pit stop. We were all trusting. Mario always came in fast, very fast. Probably, Mario's not going to want me to tell this, but John Cock, he ran pit lane about as fast as he ran the main straightaway. It didn't matter where we were. I mean, he came in really hot.
I don't remember who it was. We had somebody in here who said they would literally enter pit road at 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And
I think it was Goodyear.
It might have been, yeah.
Johnny Parsons tells the story of the year that he drove for Pat Patrick and Big Noddy, that they started practice over at the Speedway, and George set him down and he said, John, Gordy comes in here full bore for pit stops. He goes, you're losing a lot of time by not doing that. And John said, okay, George. So after that, Parsons started doing the same thing, coming as fast as he possibly could. But that was Big Noddy's way of thinking. He was always thinking about winning and those little ways to do that. And one of them was, you can't come down pit lane like a tortoise. You need to come down like a hare.
Full on.
Full tilt and hit the mark, and
hit the mark.
get out the same way.
And not anybody else.
Get out as fast as you could too. I mean, those
Sure.
guys would light it up and they were gone.
Talk about it all the time, man.
Make sure you're out of the way. And up until 73, you had 2 fuelers over the wall. You had hoses going really to each side of the car. And the one hose that went to the right side of the car, that's a real long hose, and it would go in front or go over the nose. They'd usually tie a rope on it to help get it retracted quickly. But you had to be really careful,
Yeah, they said, the real superheroes were the guys working on the cars with cars going violent to them.
Yeah, one other thing I'll add for the fans back then, we didn't wear fire suits in the beginning.
Or helmets.
Or gloves even. We had these Nomex sleeves that had elastic on them. You'd pull them up. We had polyester uniform shirts, polyester pants.
That aren't very fire retardant.
No.
Yeah, no, they kind of melt to the skin, as I recall.
Yeah, that 73, I think they mandated fire suits. That was the first year for fire suits, and then they were like one layer, and you'd wear a pair of gloves. And
Well, and you mentioned it before, and I know that, when the Eagles were designed too, that those things held 75 gallons of fuel. So
That's
when there was
correct.
an incident on pit road,
Yeah.
cars going 200 miles an hour, carrying 75 gallons of fuel, it wasn't a small one. That's why so many people
Yeah,
were injured.
they carried 70 gallons, just to be correct about that, and there were 35 gallons on each side in each bag on the Eagles and the McLaren, every car back then. And that was the case up through the 73 500. After the debacle of what was the 73 500 and the crashes and everything that ensued, before we went to Milwaukee, which was a week or two later, USAC, who was the sanctioning body back then, mandated that the bags had to come out of the right side of the car. They never went back in until much later. They made us take the fuel cell out and fill that cavity with styrofoam peanuts for whatever reason. And they also made us cut the wings down. The wing width up till the 73 500 was 64 inches or to the center line of the rear tire. But after Indy, before we went to Milwaukee, we had to shave those wings down to 54 inches. And they wanted to slow the cars down. You know, they were so afraid of government intervention in professional motorsports or in motorsports in general after the 73 500. It was like a knee-jerk reaction. We have to do something. We have to show the public that we're taking steps to, make this a safer sport. So we ran the rest of the year that way. Well, you took all your setup books and just notes, threw them out the window because, now you're missing 35 gallons of fuel on the right side, all that weight and everything else. But we figured it out. But then going into the 74 season, they made us cut the rear wings down even further to 48 inches. And they never went any wider than that. And then eventually, with the design of new cars, when Roman Slobodinsky designed his next car, which was called the Lightning, he shopped that car design to Dan Gurney. Dan couldn't afford it. So he passed on it, and Roman went to Lindsey Hopkins, a longtime, renowned IndyCar owner. Lindsey financed the building of that car, but since the fuel capacity was down to 35 gallons then, Roman designed the car and USAC allowed it where they could split the 35, 17, and 17 on each side. So the fuel went back to each side of the car there for a few years, and then he was able to narrow that nose of the car, the front of the tub down quite a bit because he didn't need that width, that capacity to hold those big bladders anymore. But that was all a result of the 73 500.
If somebody wanted to get into this game, how do they go about it?
Well, you need a car first.
Welcome back to the Skinny. We're having a great show here, man. This is some incredible information. And as we've been talking to Mike about vintage Indy, he's been filling us in along the way with his experience, of course, growing up in this industry. You just brought up a great point. As we talk about these cars, I was going to ask you to rattle off, I don't know if you can rattle off some of your favorite cars that are part of this program that you see, but Rico brought up a great point. If somebody, first of all, where do they restore the bulk of these cars? I'm sure there's just a couple of people in the country that really know this stuff well. Finding parts have to be incredibly difficult, and which means you need a really good fabricator, I would think, to reconstruct some of them as well. But if somebody wanted to get into this game, how do they go about it?
Well, you need a car first. And you have to find a car, buy a car either through an auction, a private broker, or just discover one somewhere. There still are cars out there. You have to have a passion for it. That's very important because the car's not restored. It's a labor of love, and you're either going to do it yourself or find somebody to do it. There are a handful of restorers around the country, several here in Indianapolis. Walter Goodwin is a pioneer in that category, and then Rick Duman, who's out at our shop. So we share space with D24R, Duman Turn 4 Restorations out in Brownsburg.
They've got cantilever rack. You know what cantilever rack is, right? All the way to the ceiling, 30 feet.
Yeah.
30 feet.
We've got 12 cars on that wall on the rack.
It's similar to the rack that Ganassi has.
Yeah, Ganassi and
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and all
company out of Vermont
vintage
makes those, or that's where that one.
I saw a similar thing at TRD, California.
We simply ran out of floor space out there. Even we got about 10,000 square feet, but we ran out of floor space years ago. And so Rick made the decision to invest in the racks. Of course, you need a forklift then. You have to buy a forklift to get the cars up and down. But we've got 12 cars up on the rack that are on that wall that are waiting. They're turning in queue to be restored. I think we got about 26 cars out there right now, all Indy cars, except we've got a 962 Porsche, got an F2 March, and I've got an F5000 car out there, a Talon that Chris Amon drove in the first Long Beach Grand Prix. Other than that, all IndyCar stuff, parts, memorabilia, art. The place is chock full.
You got to go out there and look at it.
Yeah,
I for sure want.
I mean, it is amazing.
and we
the
have
stuff.
we have one room that has 15 restored, running, finished vintage Indy cars in it. That's like a miniature museum. It's spectacular.
And don't get in a hurry.
Yeah,
If
you-
Rick's there,
A lot to see.
you're going to be there for a
Yeah.
little while.
A lot of art, a lot of
stuff to
photographs,
see.
all kinds of memorabilia on the walls, and
The level of knowledge that you have to go about this and make sure it's period correct, and all of those one-off parts and pieces, or hopefully maybe some pictures to help you get back to what it was. I mean,
Correct.
but you really have to have somebody that was buried in the industry at the time.
you do. I mean, that's the blessing that Rick Duman and I and others have. I mean, we lived it, so we remember and we saw all this stuff over the years, and that's a tremendous help. And you bring up a very good point there. From a photography standpoint, the photography is critical as well. We use the Photoshop over at IMS. Kendra runs that. I was just there the other day. We're getting ready to do a Gordon Johncock car. It's the 85C March that he drove in practice, and then he stepped out of it and retired, and Don Whittington qualified and drove the car. But that's how you piece all this together, and try to find all the bits and pieces if you don't have them. So, I mean, everything's out there. It's a time-consuming thing. So, but it's a labor of love. Rick Duman, in my opinion, I'm prejudiced, but his shop and he and Tim Whiting and Buckwheat out there, that they're, in my opinion, they're the real artists. They're the best in the business at restoring an Indy car. We're finishing right now the famous Mystery Eagle that Jerry Grant drove in the 72 500, which he also put on the pole for Dan Gurney out at the California 572. Famous car. Dan sold that car to the cam guy, not Jerry Eisert, anyway, he sold the car after the 72 season. Justin Gurney was able to buy that car from the estate a couple of years ago, and he entrusted it to Rick. Rick and I went out and we brought it back, and it's nearly finished now. We fired it up last week, and Rick sat in it up on the stand, went through the gears. It's going to be on the ground here shortly.
By the way, I thought maybe we were just talking to an alien with blue eyes, but he is human. He just finally forgot a name. That's great. It makes me feel a little bit better.
I'm embarrassed that I forgot it too.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on the other side.
Want to get the skinny on other guests and different types of motorsports? Check out our YouTube page and get the skinny. The Skinny is brought to you by Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04. And American Coach, innovation is our life force.
We have Mike Lashmett here. He is the president of Vintage Indy in the studio with us. And I was giving him a hard time whenever we went to the last commercial break because he finally could not remember a name. But of course, he remembered it while we were at break.
So the Mystery Eagle, Dan Gurney sold to Bruce Crowder of Crowder Cams, and Bruce ran a bunch of different stock block configuration motors in there with not so famous IndyCar drivers. Didn't have a lot of good luck with the car, but kept that Eagle his entire life, and then his kids hung on to it for a few years, and then Justin was able to buy it from the estate a few years ago.
I was scrolling through some of the pictures there on your website, and I saw the 60 turbine car, Granatelli car, right?
We have that car with us. That's been with us since get-go. They built 4 of those. The car that you're talking about is the absolute actual pole winner of Joe Leonard's, probably the most famous of the 4. Bruce Lensmeyer, great guy from Orlando, Florida, owns that car. It goes about everywhere with us. It was at Nashville 2 weeks ago, and it's really popular. The fans love it. It's an iconic car. The other 4 turbines, the Graham Hill car is restored and owned by Ray Skillman. And then the IMS Museum has the Art Pollard car. And they also have the car that Mike Spence lost his life in practice at the Speedway in '60.
Yeah, that was the Mike Spence part of that story was pretty incredible because it was Jim Clark that was supposed to drive that car.
Yeah.
He lost his life a month prior to
At Hockenheim in a F2 race.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Spence did drive it, I guess, and everything was going good. But then he hopped in for, I believe it was Greg Weld, to shake Greg Weld's car down.
Correct.
And then lost his life eventually, had a nasty accident, and then eventually succumbed to his
hit the
injuries.
wall in practice. And what happened to Mike Spence is when he hit the wall, it broke the front wishbones and suspension, and the tire and wheel came back and sadly hit him in the head. But, Granatelli ended up at the Speedway, if you can imagine this, in '68 with none of his original team. The original team was going to be Mike Spence, Jimmy Clark, Graham Hill, and Parnelli Jones. Parnelli decided not to drive the Lotus Turbine for a couple of reasons. Graham Hill, he qualifies the car, breaks in the race. Spence loses his life and so forth. And he ends up with Art Pollard, Joe Leonard, and Graham Hill. And Leonard almost wins the race, and the car flames out on a yellow flag. And, Graham Hill's car breaks, and Pollard's car also flames out after Joe Leonard. So,
Racing.
But, really,
Yeah, I love it when they say that. That's
just
racing.
incredibly iconic cars. I mean, they called them the Wedge. They called them the doorstop cars. They had all these funny names. And, of course, Granatelli being Granatelli and all the advertising that ensued around all that win, lose, or draw with Granatelli, it didn't matter. I mean, his cars were so unconventional and interesting that, they just fueled the sales of STP.
I got to ask, after you got over here, you got the job. Do you call home and tell Mom I'm not coming back home?
Yeah, I did. And I think I don't know what she thought. I mean, my mom still tells the story, and, friends and my wife can attest to that. She loves to tell the story how about I showed up at her office and needed $20. Truth is, my mom probably didn't have the $20 to really give me, but she's raising 5 kids. But, she gave me the $20. I took a leap of faith.
Since
The $20 was a good deal to get rid of you, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if I give him 20, maybe he goes and he stays over there.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, though. She sent you out to chase your dreams and as a young man.
There's another part of the story. Prior to coming to work here, Springfield, Illinois had a dirt track, of course, the Springfield Mile, a lot of auto racing going on around here, fan base, and they had a fan club there. Every May, the fan club would have this one-day bus junket for Pole Day, and they'd run ads in the Springfield, Illinois State Journal Register, and, I'd see these ads, and bus ticket was $5, and you had to be in Springfield like at 4 o'clock in the morning. The bus came over here, let everybody off at 16th at Georgetown. You did your own thing, and then you had to be back on this bus at like 6:30 or you're walking home. So I started in on, trying to get my mom to let me go to the Indy 500 by myself. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, I can take the Trailways bus to Indianapolis. Well, where are you going to stay? Well, I'll just go the day before and stay up all night, go to the race, and come home that night on the bus. So finally, my mom said, okay. I'm about 16 years
That's
old.
why I wanted to know how old you were.
I was 16.
Yep.
So I come over here on the bus. The bus station was downtown. I get a cab out the Speedway. It's now about 5 o'clock the night before the race. Place is absolutely bacchanalia, crazy party going on. Georgetown 16, the way it always was and probably still is to a great degree. And so I'm just walking around with this little, I got a little overnight bag thing with me, and I'm just walking around waiting for the gate to open at 5 o'clock. And, I'm taking in everything that's going on Georgetown. Well, it was a real eye opener. I'm a kid from a farm town, and so the gate opens at 5. I go find my seat, walk around Gasoline Alley on the outside of the fence and watch the race. And so the race is over. It's time to go downtown for this bus. Well, I was pretty thrifty back in those days. So I thought, well, I can see downtown. I'll just walk. Save the cab fare. So off I go down 16th Street. I cut down Indiana Avenue, and I end up at the bus station, get the bus. I get back to Springfield. Well, I didn't have a ticket, hadn't bought the ticket yet from Springfield to my hometown, which was 65 miles. And I thought, well, it's a nice Sunday evening. I'll just hitchhike. I've never hitchhiked before.
Oh, boy.
So I do. And I walk in my mom's house, and a friend of hers, the fellow nurse, had seen me out on the highway, 20, 30 miles away with my thumb out. She got home, and first thing she did was call my mom.
So, ratted me out.
Yeah, ratted me out. So I got home, and my mom, she was not too happy about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Lashmett, president of Vintage Indy. Dude, man, You're welcome back anytime. We
thanks.
clearly have not even scratched the surface with you.
Well,
so.
no, did great. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, great stuff, man. Incredible knowledge of the
Thank you.
sport that we love so much. So
Thanks.
there's a small part of the skinny on that guy. We'll see you next week.